All right, good evening and welcome to Sharp Night Live. Wanted to do a Q&A. We haven't done a little Q&A for a little while, so thank you all for sending in the questions. We're not going to really take live questions, maybe one or two if we get to them, but we got some excellent questions here and hopefully I can answer them. So let's give it a shot, shall we? All right, I'm just going to start with the first one from Alan, and says, I have always had trouble getting my convex Spokeshave sharpened and adjusted so it works just like when you use it, just like when I use it. I don't usually use my convex Spokeshave. What are the most common steps to getting it just right? Great question, Alan. I have no idea.
Let's pick one answer.
Do you mean this guy, right? So I think you mean this guy because that's the one I have. I just set it very light. Actually, the blade is sharpened the same way. So what we have here is a straight blade, but a convex sole on there, and that's to get into concave turns. Honestly, Alan, I rarely use this because it requires a really kind of tight turn to be useful. And by the time I get to that, I can grab a rasp quite often and hit it faster. But you've seen me use it, I guess, and it works. I know I have used it in the past. But it essentially sharpens just like a regular Spokeshave, and when you adjust it, it's more a function of playing around with how much the blade is exposed to get it to work well. I'm sorry I don't have any other tips than that right off the bat. So start off with a bang there. I don't know. All right, the next one from Daniel. I'll call you Dan. Okay, Daniel. Do you ever use a grain filler and open grain wood such as mahogany, oak, etc. in order to get a very smooth surface for a tabletop or desktop? If I do use a grain filler, is there a brand prefer and recommended application technique? Wow, this is a very timely question, Dan. I have used grain filler in the past. There's a number of ways of doing it. Sometimes you can spray a heavy-bodied sealer that will actually act like a filler, but that takes a long time and it is faster to go to grain filler. Now, traditionally, I've used oil-based grain fillers. We used them a lot at Pug Moore's, and they were by Star Finishing. I don't even think they're around anymore. But you put it on, we called it pastewood filler, grain filler, whatever. But it went on and it dried kind of fast, almost like car wax, but a little thicker. And then you rubbed it with a burlap across the grain to get it in. And you could squeegee it into the grain as well. And it usually would take 2 applications. Now, sometimes we would put it straight on the wood and it acted as a stain as well because it was colored. However, there is a new one on the market, which I said you're very timely because I'm testing one this week upcoming. So next Sharp Night Live may be on grain fillers. I think it will because I'm thinking of using it on my little, the last surviving mosquito decided to visit. The last surviving, I'm gonna use it on my breakfast table. So here's what I'm going to test. I've heard good things from a friend that I trust saying Aquacoat is excellent. It's water-based, but he talked about how well it applies and it's clear. So I'm going to be putting on the finish, staining, sealing with wax-free shellac and applying. It does say you can do that. And de-wax shellac, and then I'll seal it back in with de-wax shellac, and I'm going to put on my more durable varnish. So it apparently is very easy to work with. And this is the new and improved. I actually called Aquacoat about this to learn more about it and find out if I could use it in such a way. And I got a nice conversation with this sales guy, but you want to check it out. It's at aquacoat.com. However, I'm not giving a recommendation one way or another. I'm just telling you what it was. I haven't tested it yet. I will be doing it this week. And next Shop Night Live, I hope to have some samples out here and show you what I found. I will be comparing it as I'm using it with my experiences with oil-based, and I think it's going to be a winner though, because I've got this African mahogany. We did a video on how to finish African mahogany to look like regular, and I wasn't going to put it on the top of that table, but there are areas where it's very porous and grainy, and I know it's going to bother me because it's going to be right in front of me. So I think we're going to grain fill that and then wipe on our protective varnish. So stay tuned for that. Great question. All right. Next, we've got Paul says, how do you clean rust off tools and prevent rust from forming? Well, if I get rust on the tools, maybe you picked up an old tool, I will sand it with a wet dry paper, fine grit, 400, 600, and you can go finer to bring it up to a polish, but put it on a block. If it's a plane, you can stick it to a flat piece of glass or granite and smooth it and get the rust off. But that's the way I go about it. And then to get a finer burnish after, you can rub it out with fine steel wool to bring it up to a nice sheen. I don't really have that problem in the shop now that it's climate controlled. I have heat in the winter and cooling in the summer. It doesn't ever get moist in here. But when I didn't have a shop like that, I used to, down in North Carolina, I would get it forming on my table saw top and all over. It was bad. So I know what you're dealing with, but if you get a little heat or AC in your space, it's going to make a world of difference in rust forming on your tools. So that's one way I prevent it. The other way I've heard, I don't use this, is I know Lee Nielsen recommends like jojoba oil. Others can comment what they use there. But some like to put a little oil on their tools. I don't find the need to do that. So, but that is one suggestion. All right, hope that helped, Paul. And Dean asks, with the holidays approaching, do you have any quick Christmas gifts in mind? Well, we have we have done a couple different episodes of Christmas gifts. Some of my favorites. Maybe we could link to one of those in the past.
Okay.
But some of my favorites, is the ice cream scoop. And we've done a video on making that. It's very similar. Actually, we did that as a Shop Night Live recently, making the ice cream scoop handle. You can buy the parts. So that's a good one. It's an old timey. You can make cutting boards fast. I'm going with the fast idea. Things for the kitchen and around the kitchen. I just think of those a lot. Maybe a picture frame, but any other ideas? You guys chime in. Good to be thinking ahead, Dean. Whoa. All right, so John asks, I always seem to struggle when making half-lap joints. Not that I can't do them, but it seems to me there has got to be a simple, quick way to set up the cuts for better accuracy. Making the joint flush. What is this? Okay, then my repeated trial and error method. Got any good tips? Thanks. P.S. Love your videos. Thanks, John. All right. Well, just don't cut them, John. Just kidding. All right. So half lap joints. That's where usually meeting at the corner. If it's in the middle, it's called the mid lap. I sneak up on them usually. If you want to get a really nice, accurate half lap, I will often use a router and have a little, clamp the workpiece down with the lap facing up. Just clamp it to your bench, and you can rough saw it on the bandsaw, whatever. And then I'll use a router with a little kind of like a, what's that on those? An outrigger block of wood that's the same thickness as your workpiece. Okay, you're going to double stick tape that to the bottom of your router, and you can skim over the half lap and slightly dial it until both sides are dead flush. And that has worked for me numerous times in the past. I feel like we did that fairly recently on something. Oh, we did that actually on the chop for the for our vise right here. Except it wasn't a total half, it wasn't a mating half lap, it's just a half lap to accept the vise block. So the face, all right? Hopefully that helps. I hope I explained that well enough. Mike asks, the question is more for Chris. Oh
gosh, what?
Did you read this one?
Oh, I did read this, yes.
You are 10% supportive of Tom and his woodworking profession. What advice do you have for spouses who are not as supportive? We need a little counseling here. As we all know, it's a very expensive hobby. Yes, keep it secret. Rare that you can make a living from it. Time-consuming, addictive, dusty, and dirty. Oh, those have all been things we've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
But what do you have to say?
It's that's just such real stuff. It's difficult to address it with a quick quip of response, because I have had 30 years of honing in my attitude around these things, and it's not always been great. There's been days I've asked Tom to go work at UPS and get paid vacations and things like that. But I guess my heartiest answer would be, you have to really think about your view of money and safety and what you depend on in your life for your own sense of life quality. And, I long ago had to acknowledge that Tom, although he is a great income maker, he's not my provider. And I have other things that I need to, in a larger way, think about as far as what I put my faith in and depend on. And money is never going to be something that's going to be dependable. That said, you have to have it to live. And so I get it. I don't want to be dismissive about this because it is a big deal, but it is something I've had to do a lot of inner thinking about. And at this age, with no kids in the house and a different ability to have an income, and you're catching me at a time of life that's a little bit easier because we can both engage in that. But it's definitely a challenge. I guess I would say back to the husbands or the partners that just to be sensitive to that, because they are supporting a dream that you have, and they have visions of other ways that it might be done, and they're not always going to present their best in their best moments. So have compassion, I guess. I don't know. Is that helpful? I don't know.
Great.
It's tricky. It's really tricky, but at the same time, there's incredible reward when you live with someone who's expressing their creative bend. And, Tom has told me he couldn't do anything, didn't want to do anything else, or couldn't find his own peace in the midst of not working with his hands. And so, because I love him, I want that best for him. So, but it's hard. It's not always easy.
So that's the advice for the spouses.
Yeah. Oh, Michelle says, get your spouse involved. That's a great one.
Yeah. Good one, Michelle. Good one. Well, it is expensive. And to be honest, I did not buy expensive tools starting out. I just couldn't, because it is an expensive way to make a living. So I didn't start with the big expense. I didn't have the means, so I added on. And lately it's become this kind of huge outpouring of tools from doing the PBS show. I got a lot of tools and replaced my old ones, which I was fine with, but you know, it's a hard life when people send you tools.
Any artist, it's not a lucrative bend.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, thank you for that question.
That,
wow,
Michael.
that's a more
that was
serious
kind of
one. All right, Joey, the fireman from Brooklyn. I love that. Ask.
Thank you for your service, by the way, Joey.
Chris, I asked this question a month or two ago about what Tom did with the wooden dumbbell plates and if he's working out. What? What do you mean? Can't you tell? Do you have to ask? Isn't it obvious? No, I am like, I didn't do so good while we were away, you know, but I did do a lot of walking. However, yes, those wooden dumbbell plates are at my neighbor's in what we call the timber gym. So they're on a regular standard bench. So they're on and you have the barbell, and on the end they're 10 inches wide plates, and they look like they're hanging like from the weight. So there's one on each side. So yes, those are, I see them all the time. I do visit and hang out with my neighbor, and we actually have lifted those. When they dried out, it was a much significantly lighter weight, you know. It was like pine. But that, we started thinking, wow, we're getting strong here. Yeah. But anyway, fun to make those. Thanks for that, Joey, the fireman from Brooklyn. All right, Tom asks, did Mike Johnson from Sam Maloof Woodworker discuss how he does dust collection when sanding that much material away? Sounds like it could be a mess. I've used the cut saw and it's messy enough. Yeah, I don't know if you heard me ask that question, Tom, but I said, what do you do about the dust? Because it's crazy. But he just had a fan in the window, like in the corner. And he said he just turned that thing on and that would pull a lot of the dust out and just move it. And it went right out. I don't know if you saw where we saw the signature in the concrete of Sam. It went right out over that.
People are parking. So
I don't know if
pulling in. That
actually isn't the main parking lot for the house. So this is down near the shop where people don't tend to park as much. So it's not maybe in the public, but if you're walking around the shop and he had that on, you would probably see a column of dust blowing out the side of the building. Other than that, I didn't see a vacuum in that room. But the place was really clean, so they had some way of preparing and getting ready. That was what, it was impressive how cleaned up it was. All right, so Dan asks, have you applied milk paint? If so, lessons learned. Do you apply an oil varnish blend over the milk paint? Yeah, this was a while ago, Dan. I used to like using poplar for bases of tables, and I would put cherry on the top. It was an inexpensive way to make a nice looking table, and I would just milk paint the poplar. And I had seen some lessons on how people did it to make it look better and aged. So if I was using, for instance, a green or a cranberry, I would always add a little bit of black to it, and it gave it, I don't know, it just gave it a little more aged look. Not a lot, because it will go too crazy, but you can use it straight too, of course. And then once I got it on there, it's super easy to put on. You can brush it on. Then I would scuff sand like places where you'd expect it to wear, and it would wear through a little. So you saw a little of the white in there just lightly. And then yes, I would put a Danish oil or any kind of oil varnish on there, and it protected it, and it gave it a little more richness too. So not that it needs protecting, but it is super dry, and it's easier to clean if you once you put the varnish on. So good question. I should do something on that. It's been a while since I've used it. All right. Kevin says, I have several questions related to aniline dyes. What brand of powdered aniline dyes do you recommend for best results? And is Mohawk powdered wood stain and aniline? Let me start with the first one. What brand of powdered aniline dyes do you recommend for best results? Well, I haven't found there's a lot of difference one brand to another, so pretty much any brand is going to work great. This was the kind I used to get. I've had this pack around for a little while. Can you tell? It's got a few things. I think they still sell this, Lockwoods. This was like the brand to go to. And you can buy these little packets. This is 1 ounce. But it's more expensive when you buy it this way. You know, some of the different mail order, I used to get it from like Woodworker Supply, and they'll have a finishing section, and you can get aniline dyes there. And I think they still have Lockwoods, I'm not sure. But I get most of it, as you've probably heard me talking about, from Wood Finishing Enterprises. It's more affordable. You can get it in the 4 ounce bottles. That's the smallest, 8 ounce, 12. If you're using a lot of it, definitely this is way cheaper way to go. So this is the smallest bottle that I buy. I do get sometimes the larger ones for bigger things. But you can check them out. Wood Finishing Enterprises. They're in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. So check them out. This is the Early American Maple Medium Amber. And this dissolves in water, so as does this water-soluble aniline dyes. They're also alcohol-soluble, and there are oil-soluble. So make sure you get the kind that you want for your project. But most common and easiest to use are the water-based. So there you go. The second question was, is Mohawk powdered wood stain an aniline dye or pigment stain? Well, I have not used Mohawk powdered wood stain, but if when you put it in the solvent, probably water, does it dissolve completely? If it dissolves, it's a dye stain, it's an aniline dye stain, almost certain. If it does not dissolve, which I doubt it would, it's a pigmented stain. The pigment, here's a little thing of pigment. This is what they use in paints. It's just the powdered earth, like there's a certain color, and they'll mix it with oil paints. It's pulverized so fine, it's like cigar ash, you know, like see how I brush that out? So it colors, but it's more opaque because it does not dissolve fully. It's like a little powder that adds the color. So this is used in, oil. I'm talking like nice oil paints, household oil paints, and sometimes it's used in combination with dye stains in like Minwax finishes as well. That's why often you have to stir the can. Some of that is pigment at the bottom of the can. Some is an oil-based dye in the liquid, but there you go. The last one out of that is, where are some sources to purchase powdered aniline dyes? Well, I already answered that. So there you go, Wood Finishing Enterprise. All right. Scott asked, what with the FB510, that is the Felder bandsaw that I have over there, the FB510, that is a really nice bandsaw for resawing and whatnot. Do you have any tips in setting up the guides to prevent drift? Wow, we did an episode on this where it was on resawing wood, and I actually set up a special fence for that because it wasn't apparent how you could adjust the fence or the rails to accommodate the drift. There are special aftermarket fences you can buy to adjust and more easily accommodate for drift. One was with the Laguna. I'm not sure if Felder now offers anything like that, but I need to try it on the rail. I did not make my adjustment on the rail. I made it by making a little wedge. We can link to that video of resawing and how I set up for that. As far as setting the guides to prevent drift, I have found that it's just not always possible to prevent drift. I know some people say, you do this, you're gonna not have drift, but I think there may be something a little askew with the saw too, like it needs a little maintenance or something. But I run the blade in the middle, and on that it's high tension, so the blade is really locked in. The guides come right up and just lightly touch. So there's no play at all in the blade. It's just the orientation of when I'm cutting, I may have to slightly angle the piece to cut through. That's what we mean by drift, is you can't just saw straight perpendicular into it. You find that in order to cut along a straight line, you may have to push the piece one side to the other or drift over. So you want to set your fence right to that drift angle if you're going to be resawing, especially, in order to get good results. That's why I link you to the resaw video. So check that out. That's one way of doing it, but better if your saw has an adjustment specifically to that. All right. Let's see. Aaron asks, the 50 by 36 inch dining table I'm building has been plagued by wood movement. The top is fine after a lot of work, but four pieces I've cut for the apron and the 12 for the legs are bowed. I'm gluing together 3 pieces per leg and know that I first have to joint them, plane them, and glue them. But the 4 apron pieces won't be glued to parallel pieces to add additional width. And I'm worried that they'll move again after I put the apron together. What do you suggest? Well, I'm not sure why they're bowed. Did you resaw the wood and they bowed? Is the wood not real dry? You know, I would cut them just a little longer than the final dimension, like an inch, and then true them up, flatten them as they are. You said they're bowed a little bit. So take the bow out and hopefully you have enough thickness still there to then plane it and you'll get it. And you said you don't want them to bow again. So I'm assuming you're able to true them up. So once you've trued them up, you shouldn't have an issue if they're dry, okay? They're acclimating to your shop. So I usually try not to dress things all the way down to the final dimension right away, but get it into your shop, let it kind of acclimate a little bit, and then you can flatten one side, thickness plane it, but leave it like an 1/8 inch heavy. You kind of sneak up on the final dimension, because after you've done that, you've kind of disturbed the equilibrium to that piece as well. There might be stresses in the board, but more than that, it's the change in moisture relationship near the surface. So you're going to come back and quite often you're going to see the board is slightly cupped or slightly bowed. It's perfectly normal, even with kiln dried wood, because of the change in it coming into your shop. So then let it rest a day or two, and then you're going to skim plane it again, which you're going to do, and then final thickness, and you should be fine. I'm assuming that top is going to be, the rails may be screwed to the top. That's going to get them fine. If it's an apron, you're not going to be able to see if it's bowed anyway. But I don't think you'll experience much if it's dry and you proceed in that way. All right, Jerry asks, have you done any segments on finishes? Yes, we have. Such as polyurethane and how many coats are needed and how to rub between coats. Such as 220 grit or 4/0 steel wool. I just finished a coffee table and the individual coats look good, but the last coat is not that great. Oh man, can we all relate to that? Right, Jerry? So I have done a lot of segments on this. And one of the secrets to a great looking finish is this final step called finishing the finish. And we've done videos on that too, where I rubbed out a finish. One of the things I talk about though in this video is that polyurethane, the resin itself, is on the harder scale. So think, it's not like diamond to finishes, but it is on the harder scale, that resin. So it does not take to the rubbing out phase as well. It's not as friendly to the scratching of the leveling, and it's hard, and it makes it harder to level. So I always, if I use polyurethane at all, I use it as a blend with other more favorable finishes like tung oil or an alkyd varnish. So Armor Seal by General Finishes is like an alkyd varnish with a little polyurethane. The Sutherland Wells finishes some of them have urethane with the tung oil, the polymerized tung oil. And I've been experimenting with those, as you know, and I'm really enjoying the results. Maloof finish is also a combination of like a linseed oil with some urethane and I believe a thinner. Someone correct me with that. It's been a while since I've read the formula, but it's pretty sure it's a 3-part formula. And so you're getting like this easier use and it wipes off. You get the protective hardness of the polyurethane, but it's cut by being in formulation with another resin. So check out that video on rubbing out finishes. You always follow the directions of the scratch pattern between coats. So I would just go with that. And maybe, the last coat, you might thin it down and maybe use a different blend and wipe it down thin. One of the interesting things that you may have heard me ask Mike Johnson at Sam Maloof's last week was, how do you put on your finish, right? Because I looked at the finish and I thought, gosh, those are really, really beautiful. Like really had the rubbed out look. But I was thinking to myself, they would not rub out all these chairs. That's a lot of work, like all those angles. So it was interesting and confirming to hear him say, they put 5 coats of a wiping varnish, and after applying the varnish, he wipes it off, right? I mean, a lot of those wiping varnishes tell you to wipe it off. I've traditionally left a thin film, right? Or thicker on the last coat if I was going to do the rubbing out step, because you're basically sanding the finish and then you're burnishing it up to finer sheen. However, with this approach, you do not do a final rub out. You're like almost wiping it all off. And I said to him, I go, well, you're leaving some on because look at the chair. It is bright. And he was saying that it's mostly in the pores. It is on the surface too, but it does fill the pores. But it's really a foolproof way to get an elegant finish if you apply the varnish and wipe it off. So you apply it very thin and then you're wiping it off with coats. You're not leaving a streaky residue. So that's easier if you have a urethane blend, because the urethane is harder to push around and leave it really fine and level. That's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, equal parts polyurethane paint thinner and BLO.
Boiled linseed oil.
Boiled linseed oil. Thank you. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought.
And he also said it's not highly protective. So
what? Well, the urethane.
With water. Remember he said you like it wouldn't.
Yeah, he said that, but I also think it's more so than he was giving you credit, because there was a sheen on the surface and it is polyurethane. So that has the more water resistant. The linseed oil is actually not as great, you know what I mean? But it's countered by the blend of the urethane. We could go on and on about finishes, but I am going to be talking about that. I'm going to try that method after I go over the African mahogany and use this. I'm going to try to use a thinner wiping method on the top. This is new because I've usually had to go harder, but I'm going to use the Sutherland Wells and experiment a little bit before that. And we'll see, you know. What I love about it is it's almost like a polish. The last one is like a polish and you're buffing it off pretty much, but you're leaving this small little sheen and then it cures and you don't have to go back and rub it out. So that could be your answer, Jerry. That's a long-winded one. Sorry. Finishing always does that to us, doesn't it? All right, Dan asks, taking into account wood movement, what is the best substrate when applying veneer to a furniture piece? All right, well, their substrates have different strengths, all right? The two big ones that are commonly used in veneering are MDF and a higher grade plywood, all right? MDF has the virtue of great flatness, so you don't have any kind of waviness to it. However, it does move very slightly seasonally. I can tell you this because I had a callback on a big conference table job. into these schools where I had a seam, and it's a long story, but it was 1 inch thick, like MDF, and it does absorb and move slightly. However, it's only an issue if you have these large expanses, right? It's not enough to really worry that much about. However, plywood, like a good grade, especially like a Baltic birch, or that dimensionally is more stable than the MDF. And if I had to go back again, I would have used the plywood core, like a 1/2 inch plywood core, and put it in a sandwich of 1/4 inch MDF on each side. Then I'd have the best of both worlds. I have this nice flat surface sandwich, but that core of plywood would restrain the MDF movement, and that would be the best. That's not to say you have to do that. I'm just saying plywood is really good. You just want to have a nice flat piece if it's not an overly big project. The nice thing about using plywood is you don't have to worry about the screws. If you have to run any kind of screws into it, getting good purchase. In MDF, it's a little fibrous and it could tear out. So a lot of times I'll put a wood plug where I'm going to run the screw and get better purchase when I'm using MDF. Let's finish with this one and then we'll come back to the others. Rick asks, what most surprised you in your Sam Maloof shop tour? Great question, Rick. What surprised you? Well, there was numerous things, but I think one of the most surprising was that they were selling Sam Maloof's desk chair. You know, when he goes, that's Sam's desk chair over there.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? I thought to myself, like, this should be in a museum or something, you know, or in a private collection that's really special. That's to me, that's going to be a valuable piece over time. And then there was a photo that they sent me later of him sitting in it, and he's leaning back like this with his feet up on the desk. Classic, and it's that chair. So that was very cool. I bet if you were interested in that, you could probably get him to write you up some provenance. And I bet you it has the Sam Maloof signature. It's pretty special, but it's a very collectible. It's not cheap.
I like the thing about him working on the floor, because you do see pictures of him on the floor, and I never thought to ask that.
Yeah.
To consider what he was doing.
Yeah, and like I said, there's some great photos in the book, the Sam Maloof woodworker, and he's on the floor, and it's like, man, that guy's into it. And he was a little older than me at that time. He just gets down on the floor. So he was really vigorous like that. Some of the other things that surprised me, the dust collection thing was a thing. Oh gosh, I thought of something else. There's something else, but I can't remember it. But I wanted to just stay there. I wanted to make a chair. I wanted to work on one. And just related to that, I know there was another question about if I have any plans of making a chair, making a Maloof chair. And let's see. Yes, I do, but it's going to be more for my personal adventure. It's not the kind of chair that I would make and I draw plans and do a course and sell. I believe it's still a licensed piece. And there are those out there already. And if you want to make a Sam Maloof chair, I would say go for it. But I'm not gonna work that up. We've got some nice rocking chairs coming up. We're gonna do the shaker rocker here soon. And I also want to do a more contemporary version that is related to the shaker rocker, but it's more of an Eshrick Maloof treatment. So it'll be an original, okay? I need a little more time to work that out. So I'm going to do the shaker rocker first, and that'll be more straightforward copy of a Canterbury rocker. That's an awesome chair. And anyway, should we do this again soon, I guess?
I think we should.
We got to finish this up. All right. Let us know how you like this Q&A. We haven't done it a lot, but let us know. I'm happy to do it. I always feel like I should be showing you something more tangible, but I guess we cover a lot of subjects this way, not just as hands-on.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions?
Oh, there's, well, many questions, and some have come up on the chat, but we'll let you.
All right, if you enjoyed this content, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and check out Epic Woodworking at epicwoodworking.com for courses, join the neighborhood, all that fun stuff. We'd love to see you over there. A lot of these questions can be asked in the forum, and you'll get some really great feedback from neighbors just like you. All right, so once again, thanks for hanging out with us here in the sharp and beautiful Canterbury, New Hampshire. We look forward to seeing you next time. On behalf of the camera lady and myself, right back here on Sharp Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Thanks again for submitting your questions, everybody. We hope to get to them, the other ones too. Take care.